Voyage.
I'm Darren Marlar, your host for all things felonious. Welcome to Allegedly. You probably don't give much thought to tow trucks, do you? They're an essential element of our society, but basically they're invisible. You need a tow, you call a number, a tow truck shows up and does the job. But it's this anonymous, invisible nature that makes tow trucks a great way to sell drugs. Listen on, and next time you need a tow, we can guarantee you will give that tow truck a second look.
When I got out of prison on a street dealing charge, I got what was supposed to be a straight job as a tow truck driver. Turns out, being a tow truck driver is a great way to sell drugs.
This is James LaRoche. That's not his real name. None of the names you'll hear in this episode are real, but all the stories are. To protect the real James's identity, you'll hear an actor reading James's writings, his recollections of his experiences. James's life as a drug dealer had an unexpected start with an injury to a very delicate area.
As per the accident, I remember it so clearly. It was October. I was in high school. I'd been hitting the labor halls pretty regularly, and my pops took notice to my work ethic and said,
I can't afford to get you a car, but I can afford to get you a motorcycle.
I didn't want my first bike to be bought for me by my dad. Plus, I didn't even know how to ride a motorcycle, and the ATV I had as a kid was an automatic. So I settled on a moped because it was an automatic. My dad was confused, but was happy that mopeds were even cheaper than motorcycles. We found a cheap Chinese scooter online in the Austin area. Anyway, I went to bed that night, woke up and went to school, came home, waited on my dad. My dad came home and didn't seem to be in much of a rush to get the moped. In hindsight, that was red flag number 1. Red flag number 2 was the amount he was drinking before we even left. Now, my pop's probably downed an easy 6 brews. Not a big deal to me at the time because it was normal behavior for my family. Then I go out to the patio and smoke a cigarette. I'm 18 now and don't have to hide that I smoke cigarettes anymore. Still had to hide the weed and beer. I came back in from the patio.
Is it cold outside?
Not really, but I'd take a jacket. We get down to the parking garage and fire up the bike. My dad rode a silver 1300cc touring bike.
Should we take the helmets?
Should we take the helmets? This question I remember being asked, but I don't remember who asked it. And I remember we both thought about taking the helmets, but we both decided not to. There are no helmet laws in Texas. Wearing a helmet is the rider's choice. While some think this is a perfect example of Southern stupidity, I honestly believe that I would have died if I was wearing a helmet, and I will explain why. Big helmets serve as a counterweight, and that's not always to your favor. The way we crashed and the way I was catapulted off the bike into the air, my helmet would have served as additional weight and would have counterbalanced my natural balance, and I would have likely landed on my head, and my skull would have broken into a bunch of pieces, and my helmet would have just been a fancy soup bowl, holding my floating brain from leaking out of my head. However, because I wasn't wearing a helmet, I still had my natural balance. And I knew, don't land on your head. So we didn't take the helmets. We're zooming down the highway, and if I remember correctly, my pops is still drinking. And we check out that moped. I don't really remember what the seller's place looked like. I just remember not wanting to be there. My dad was making fun of me for wanting the moped and was being your typical drunk Texan dad. After about 30 minutes of ridicule, we agreed to pick up the moped next day, and I was going to ride it home. So we're hauling ass down the road. We get to a stoplight, and before we come to a complete stop, my dad lays down the bike and it dumps both of us. The bike had a high center of gravity and therefore had these fins designed for just that. But because the bike was so heavy, it took both of us to lift it. I shot my dad with a dirty look. Come on, man.
Come on, help me lift it.
So we lift the bike, I hop on the back, and we're flying down the road, and we have green lights all the way down the line. Things are feeling better, like thank God, green lights. Now I can finally go home, do my homework, get my moped, or so I thought. On one of our green lights, a Beamer pulls out in front of us, and we T-bone the car at about 55, 60 miles an hour. We were doing 70 miles an hour, but my dad was able to grab a couple of gears before the impact. The sounds of the gears whirring and the RPM spiking was nerve-wracking. Sounded like screaming steeds wheeling a death chariot. Then came the bright light from the headlights. A second before impact, I observed my father closely, and time seemed to slow down. Every muscle of his stout and stocky 6 foot, 220-pound corn-husking body tensed up. It was as if he was trying to pull the bike straight back, helpless. My eyes got big, and the light from the headlights casted a shadow to where all the color from our jackets, jeans, boots, and socks turned into a dark silhouette, and the last bit of color was blood orange from the light motorcycle gauges. Then, my father laid out the famous Texan farewell known across the land that starts with "fuck" and was dead before he could finish with "you." And we plowed straight into the son of a bitch. The sound of the crash was horrible, and my father's back served as a launching pad because I remember my knees brushing up the back of his jacket, and I was catapulted over the car, flew through the intersection, and like Superman, all the color came back to life, and I flew so high and so far up in the air I was able to wriggle my body like a little Siamese cat, and I actually tried to land on my feet running. I put my foot down, and then physics took over, and I went splat. It started with my right boot, but the ground came out from under me, and I turned over to roll on my right shoulder. But when I hit with my back and shoulder, I bounced back up and tumbled like a tumbling tumbleweed, and then came to a stop in the sitting position. I never once hit my head, and I didn't have any broken bones, but my balls hurt so bad. Oh, so bad. My balls! Problem was, I didn't have any words because my voice was gone. Not quite COVID gone, because I could still kind of talk, but I sounded like a cartoon mouse. I always thought that it was a myth that if you get hit in the balls hard enough that your voice will squeak like a dying mouse being suffocated by a snake, and it's definitely not a myth. It's a fact. Now I had two problems. My balls hurt more than they had ever hurt before, and my cries for help were mere squeaks in the wind. Then I look over to my dad, and he's lying on the road, lifeless, with blood pouring out of his face and onto the asphalt. He's not moving, he's not screaming, not even twitching. His limbs are sprawled in different directions, and he looks at peace, like if he were in a deep sleep. And the blood keeps pouring out. And now I had three problems. My balls hurt more than they had ever hurt before. My cries were mere squeaks in the wind. And my dad was dead. My voice came back not long after a good couple series of squeaks, and I cried out for my dad. I tried getting up a couple times to go see him, but failed, and I just laid on the asphalt screaming my balls at the top of my lungs. Happy that my voice was back, but I bellowed out in anger and agony. My balls! My balls! Ah! My balls! I'm gonna sue you. I'm gonna sue you so hard. My balls. The fire department arrived and tried to grab me by my hips. That wasn't gonna fly, so when he came over to grab me, I threw a punch at him. Understandably, he didn't understand why and said he was trying to help me. By this point, a few more EMTs and firemen arrive, and I hear one of them say to cut my jacket open and get me on the stretcher. The EMTs come up to me with big silver scissors, and as they approach, I start swinging more punches at them and scream, "No, don't cut it!" The EMTs are getting frustrated and make me a deal. One of them says,
"I tell you what."
And it should be known that the "I'll tell you what" is a phrase common amongst Texans.
"I'll tell you what."
He sighs and points his index finger at me and puts his other hand on his hip and finishes with,
"If you can take your jacket off yourself and you stop punching us, I'll let you keep it."
They gave me a few seconds to consider, and I managed to get my jacket off, and the EMTs took the jacket and loaded me up into the stretcher, and I kept groaning. My balls. My balls. And then one of the EMTs approached me and says,
Your dad's not dead.
I was glad my dad wasn't dead, but that didn't change my general disposition. They loaded me up on the ambulance, and I would not let up. They thought I was in shock, that my balls was my mantra. They kept asking,
Where does it hurt, sir? Is it your neck? You were just in an accident. How about your back?
my balls! My dad was on the other stretcher next to me, and as it turned out, he had the luxury to be knocked unconscious for all this. So I endured the physical and emotional pain from impact to stretcher. So the EMT keeps asking, and I'm not giving them the answer they want, and then my dad pipes up and is conscious enough to act like a responsible parent, and he says,
Son, come on. Snap out of it. You gotta snap out of it.
I'm on my stretcher, crying and screaming, my balls. Finally, the EMT opens my pants, and I'll never forget the look. His eyes were like two full moons, both of horror and disbelief. Like he'd never seen that before, and he said,
You're gonna need stitches.
Later at the hospital, they put me in the MRI table, and I was shaking, flopping around. I was in so much pain. And I remember the nurses arguing and bickering amongst themselves. One nurse came up to my ear and asked if I did drugs and could hold my shit. I nodded yes. He said he was going to give me the good shit. 2 doses of fentanyl, and all my pain melted away. The drug was so powerful, I dissociated, and the drug gave me a trip, similar to a dream state. My fentanyl dream state was I was in a field of marigolds. The accident and the money received from it set the tone and the bar for the rest of my life. It gave me enough money to make some moves.
James went on to deal drugs for years, until he got himself into a corner, and the only way he could see out was to turn himself in to law enforcement. This would lead him on a winding road to driving a tow truck.
Sometimes life sucks so much, you'd rather go to jail than deal with your problems. Of course, when you're a drug dealer, typical problems meld with atypical situations. My problems were typical. Bad breakup, got kicked out of my place, wasn't making enough money. Money I did make went to bills, and the city of Austin was wearing me down. And here's where my problems as a drug dealer are somewhat different from yours. My bills come from warrants and attorney fees. A bad breakup means your ex is partying her ass off, doing drugs, banging dudes with a banging pair of sweet tits, the ones you bought from selling drugs. And your son is separated from you because you're a drug dealer with warrants out for your arrest. Getting kicked out was for punching the new roommate in the head, and you hit him so hard he fell over onto the kitchen table. You're not making enough money because the price of pot has dropped $1,000 a pound. The city's wearing you down because you're almost certain the postmaster has been building a case against you from all the pounds you've been flipping, shipping them all through the U.S. mail. You can't deal anymore, and jail actually seems like a good idea because you're about there from mailing packages filled with drugs, and it's time to lie low. Lying low in jail may not be somebody's first choice, but there's running water, flushing toilets, and 3 meals a day. They ain't hot, but they're free. And whatever problems you do have, well, you don't anymore because you're in jail. And jail comes with its own set of problems. Some thugs think turning yourself in is stupid, and that depends, but street dealing is most definitely stupid. I've had a thug in Vegas try and pull a gun on me for $20. With street dealing, you could come back with the rent money in a day or not come back at all. It's extremely dangerous, and I was good at it, but New Orleans was better. New Orleans put me in check, big time. See, Louisiana is a different kind of state. They don't have counties, they have parishes. And Orleans Parish isn't a jail, it's a prison. And the difference between a jail and a prison are night and day. People who go to jail don't want any real trouble because they're going to be getting out relatively quick, like a week, 6 months, maybe a year, 2 tops. But people in prison do want trouble because there ain't shit else to do, and they ain't getting out anytime soon, if ever. Typically, you go to jail first. You do a little bit of time, bond out, or are let out on your own recognizance. And if you fucked up big, you spend all your time in jail praying you don't go to prison, so you don't want any problems. New Orleans cuts out the middleman and throws everyone into one fucked up prison. #OPP, y'all. And OPP, from its foundation to the roof, is nothing but trouble. And the guards run the place like it's a prison, and the inmates border the edge of barbarians. I went to the Hilton of OPP, and I still think the feds should take over the facility. But I didn't just go to OPP right out the rip. I was able to put 4 years between me and the initial charge and did my thing in Texas. 4 years later, and with the price of pot plummeting, I turned myself in, broken-hearted with nothing in my name but 3 pounds of herb I had stashed away in Austin. So why would I turn myself in and not sell the 3 pounds? Well, because the postmaster had already seized a few packages with some pounds in them, and that was bad. That puts you on the radar, and even worse was, I spent all my drug money on a pair of tits, a couple apartments, sushi, and day trips. It sucked, bro. Those titties, my son, that money, on those drugs and the postmaster seized, were never coming back. Losing my son was the hardest part, and the cherry on top was herb had dropped $1,000 a pound, and I was going to have to get a real job to pay my child support after I got out of jail. But I didn't go to jail. I went to a prison. Word of the wise, don't go to prison with a broken heart. You will not thrive, and the inmates will smell it. And from there, it's only a matter of time before you're fucked, maybe even up the ass. OPP is a sinister place. And when I got out, I realized I am never going to commit another felony in the state of Louisiana again. But by doing the right thing and turning myself in, I copped some respect from the staff, and I'm convinced Orleans Parish did me a solid and let me out earlier than they should have. I thought I was going to be there for 6 months, and I was out in less than a week. I even got my money back from my attorney because he didn't show up to my court date. So with the refund from my attorney and the 3 pounds I had waiting for me in Austin, I got a job driving tow trucks, and by doing the right thing and turning myself in, I was rewarded. Big time. Because I learned how to be a better drug dealer from the people who trained me driving the tow trucks, one of them being a cop, the other a criminal. I took a few plays out of both their books, also developed a new drug habit, but that play came out of my own book.
That new drug habit was morphine tea. James was trying to stay sober except for morphine tea, which he'd used throughout his towing job. What is morphine tea, you may ask?
What is morphine tea? So, morphine tea is derived from a cold water extraction of unwashed poppy seeds. The best seeds are straight out of Afghanistan. They produce 80% of the world's opium supply, and most of this opium is used for making heroin. Here's the part people neglect. Every one of those pods used for extracting opium is filled with wondrous poppy seeds, which have been marinating in the opium latex within the pod. After the opium latex has been harvested, the pod dries and the seeds are protected. Crack open the dried poppy pod and you have 100% pure, unwashed poppy seeds. Now, you're not going to do any of this yourself. All of what I've mentioned is tedious and requires cultivation. You're looking to buy the seeds off the World Wide Web. I'm not going to tell you where exactly to get them, but I will tell you what to look for. The best morphine tea is derived from the freshest seeds, and when you rifle your hand through a bag of fresh, unwashed seeds, they should feel oily, be dark in color, and have a strong nutty aroma, and leave a light film over your fingers. Only hit 2 of the 4 marks, you get ripped off. Hit all 4 marks, and you could be seeing Jesus later that afternoon. You can totally overdose and die off these seeds. I've overdosed more than once, and it's painful. 1 dose equals 2 shot glasses worth of unwashed poppy seeds, poured onto 12 ounces of cold water inside the 16-ounce water bottle. Then you shake the bottle for 5 to 7 minutes, turn the bottle upside down, crack the top of the water bottle, and squeeze the wash into your cup. Now be careful not to get any seeds into the cup you're going to be drinking out of. The cold water bleeds out the trace amounts of morphine from the seeds, which adds up to a sizable dose of morphine. Poppy seeds which have been washed won't work, or won't work as well. At the end of my addiction, I learned that I bought and used more poppy seeds than what a commercial baker goes through in a year. It takes a lot of seeds to support the habit, and your dosage will only increase the more you use, but shit works. You'll fail a drug test and eventually overdose. It's just how it goes when you roll the dice with substances that kill.
James started his job as a tow truck driver and needed to be trained. He was in for a surprise when he met his trainer.
How'd you wind up doing this?
I'm still active duty. Narcotics. I just do this on the side.
No shit.
Yep.
How long you been a a cop?
About 10 years now.
Ever arrest any tow truck drivers?
Actually, come to think of it, no. Well, not that I know of. Look, the job's hard enough. I can't imagine doing it high.
I was completely strung out during this conversation, but I remember everything she said. Sure, totally.
Look, busting someone for selling $200 worth of weed is a part of the job, and we do it all the time. And if we can impound their car, even better. But it's not really a good use of police resources. Too much paperwork. You might as well just give the guy the $200 and let him keep their car.
Did you ever smoke?
Between us?
Of course.
Sure, in college. I don't have a problem with it. I'd still smoke now if I could.
Wait, so what's a good arrest then?
Every dog has its day, but mostly people who hurt people. If you're not hurting anyone, if you're not intimidating anyone, if your customers like you, you're probably good. At the same time, we have to use the little ones to get to the big ones. It's what we do. One fish could be the supplier of 100 little fish. Narcotics cops want the big weight, the noisy kind.
While James got the viewpoint of law enforcement through one coworker, he got the criminal perspective from another.
Freddie was a crook from birth, born into the ganglands of South Austin. If the system had a world tour, he toured every venue. Juvie, jail, state jail, and a little bit of prison. He came from a family of bloods, and doing time was part of the process, and the process came with handcuffs, jail time, criminal records, and ankle monitors. When I met Freddie, he was on the monitor. It was sort of a genius loophole. He couldn't be a gang affiliate for the time being, but the state didn't say he couldn't work. So Freddie hustled for the gang while on call for the tow company, and the state couldn't contest his whereabouts because wherever he was part of the job. Freddie taught me a lot, and we hit it off well. He respected that I wasn't clicked up with a gang and that I had my own thing going. What I learned from Freddie was worth its weight in gold because I never got busted, and it was easy, so easy to take care of everything in the truck. It was like having a license to kill, and I sold the kill out of the truck on a regular basis and nobody suspected a thing. It was the only job that I actually used my days off for myself because I got work and drug dealing done down at once. It was awesome.
Okay, but how exactly do you sell drugs out of a tow truck?
Here's how to sell drugs out of a tow truck 101. There's 3 kinds of ways to sell drugs out of a tow truck. The first, you sell your own drugs. The second, you sell someone else's drugs. And the third, you own the tow outfit, and you're the godfather of the yard and the area you cover. The first way, already be a drug dealer. Then get a job driving a tow truck. Then use the truck instead of your personal vehicle to make your rounds. Make the rounds round the clock during the work hours or have clients meet up with you if needed. Pretend to offer basic roadside assistance in full towing uniform during the felony exchange, and don't get caught. The second is like the first, but you don't own the drugs outright because you're clicked up with a gang or run for an independent, and it's a little more organized. My coworker ran with a gang and fit this bill. So when you're in a gang, you run with the gang, but real gangsters don't give a fuck and will do business with anyone. If you're heavy in the game, you can pay a guy like my coworker to run your drugs for you, but only if you were lucky enough to do business with him in the first place and not find yourself robbed. That's when you know you got respect as an independent. So the car is already loaded with drugs and is parked with the keys locked inside the car. Driver rolls up to the car, usually at night, after peak towing hours, but still on the clock, and uses the lockout equipment inside the tow truck to unlock the car with the drugs. Driver takes the keys, pops the car in neutral, and loads the car onto the bed of the tow truck. Once the car is on the bed of the truck, the load mazes through the city undetected by police. The driver takes the load to the drop, unloads the car, and locks the keys back in the car. The buyer comes with a spare and will either unload the drugs from the car or will drive the load to another place, but the risk of driving an imprisonable amount of shit through a city in which you're being watched by police is avoided. The job takes less than an hour, and the runner makes an extra $800 to $1,000 while still on call for the tow company. Think about it. When have you ever seen a tow truck pulled over and searched by police? Never. And now ask yourself, how many times have you been pulled over and asked by the police if there were any drugs or weapons in your car? Always. You could be in a gang or running as an independent, get pulled over by the police, and when the police ask, got any drugs or weapons in the vehicle, you can honestly answer the officer no, full knowing your shit just passed through undetected because you're in the know. It happens every day. The third, you're the godfather of the yard and the area you cover. It takes a lot to get to this level, and if you find yourself on the radar, it's going to be on the federal level. But you got your shit so dialed in, you may never find yourself getting caught. You hide in plain sight, been in business for years, work directly with the police, and regularly run a shit ton of calls. You have all your papers and all your licenses. Every call you run is a call you own. You work for and answer to no one and keep 100% of your profit margins, both legitimate and illegitimate. See, police officers and tow truck drivers work alongside each other every day. This is separate from typical tow truck roadside assistance. These calls are for wrecks and arrests, and there are lots of them, so you get to know the cops pretty well, and eventually you build trust with the police and break the law with the police and smuggle shit tons of whatever you want with the police. Now, this level of thug doesn't happen overnight. You gotta get a license to get on police rotation. Not any Joe Schmo tow operator is gonna get the license because there's a certain amount of skill required to clean up after a wreck, and you gotta get it done fast. Cops appreciate speed when cleaning up after a major accident. After the wreck, you gotta take the car to the yard, which you also own, where the car's gonna sit for a while until the insurance figures out what is gonna be done with the vehicle. Then you put the drugs you've been able to manufacture into the already wrecked vehicle from the fatality and run your drugs in the car from the fatality. If for some reason you do get pulled over, the drugs were already in the car from the wreck or arrest, and the police missed the drugs during the initial search, and the owner of the vehicle is dead, and it's not your problem because you run an honorable towing company, and good luck proving it in court. Seriously, it gets more sophisticated than that. You gotta factor abandoned vehicles, stolen vehicles, vehicles without license plates, vehicles wrecked so bad you'd never be able to find the stash unless you start taking apart the car. So if you're already a drug manufacturer who also happens to run a tow outfit, every missed search by police is 100% pure profit, and every thief who breaks into your yard is a blessing because it creates more plausible deniability. It's not uncommon for a kilo or two to be missed by police, and it isn't hard to put a few kilos in a pair of baggy pants and plant a thief to rifle through the vehicle scheduled to be removed from the yard later. So this type of outfit is extremely organized. There are lots of players in the outfit, and some don't even know each other, but they still play a critical part in the flow. The ambiguity of who do the drugs actually belong to is extremely difficult to prove, and thus police. You're more likely to make an arrest on a guy like myself or my coworker than actually being able to arrest the Godfather. Don't fuck with the Godfather of the yard. He could have you killed. He might even pay a cop to do the job. So, go figure.
On James's first day properly on the job, after his training, the two worlds of legit tow truck driving and drugs collided.
This was on my first official day as a tow truck driver. Okay, so the customer was present, and we were on good terms, and I was arguing with the owner of a tire shop. He wanted me to drop the car in a very specific spot in the lot, but I didn't have the chops to do it because I was new on the job. So I did my best to stay cool and do the job because of the half-pound I had stashed behind the seat of the tow truck. I was supposed to sell it right after the call I was running. But this guy, he was a real hard-ass, like a psycho football coach dickhead, kind of similar to my dad's demeanor, and it must have brought about some kind of familiar trigger of mine because I popped the breaker, got up in the guy's face and roared, "Fuck you!" Then hopped in the tow truck and slammed the door and threw the truck in reverse with the customer's car still chained on the bed of the tow truck, and slammed on the gas, aiming for where the tire shop owner wanted the customer's car, but I missed and crashed into his building instead. And it looked like I did it completely on purpose, which I didn't, but I did crash into the guy's building, 100%. I'm surprised the customer was not upset at all. He just asked for me to drop his car and said he'd park it himself. But the tire shop owner, however, he was stunned and furious. He turned lobster red and screamed at me.
You're done! You're going to jail now. Oh, you're going to jail. I know exactly what kind of employee you are, and you're going to jail, partner. How do you like that? How do you like that, hothead?
Well, I didn't like that, not one bit, but it was too late now. The guy had already called the cops, and I'd just finished dropping the customer's car, and it was time to do something before the cops showed up. The guy was on the phone with 911.
Yeah, I just had some hothead in a tow truck on drugs crash into my building. What's your name, son?
I'm not giving you my name.
What?
I'm not giving you my name. I get back into the tow truck, and I know it's time to go.
He's not giving me his name. I don't know. He's leaving.
Yep, I sure was. I knew I had to leave the tire shop, but I also knew if I got on the main roads, the cops would be looking for me. Luckily, there was a home improvement store in the same mega lot as the tire shop, so I drove the tow truck over to the parking lot of the home improvement store and turned the truck facing the tire shop, and there was still brick dust and yellow paint on the bed of the truck from crashing into the guy's building. And I still had to get rid of the pot because it was a felony possession with mandatory jail time behind it. I had just gotten out of jail in New Orleans and had just gotten this job. So I waited in the truck a while till I didn't see any customers in the parking lot and hopped out the truck with the half-pound in my computer bag and stashed it in some bushes in the parking lot. I called my boss and he told me to hold tight. He also told me that some of Freddie's cocaine might still be in the truck and I couldn't find it. That part sucked, but what could I do? 4 police units and a narcotics officer showed up. I spoke with all the officers. The only reason I got out of that one was because I was able to use some of my training from my police officer coworker when talking to police, and turned out the cops couldn't even cite me because the wreck was on private property, so that was my saving grace. I ran a few more calls and went back for my pot and sold it later that night and made an extra $900. Yeah, I could have gone back to jail, but I didn't. That was probably the closest I came to going to jail in the truck, but it opened my eyes. The truck was like having an invisible cloak, and I did well for myself in the truck. It was fun, easy, and provided a lot of safety for what would normally be deemed as risky behavior.
James's life would go on without a dull moment as he continued to deal drugs and use drugs until he got sober, including from morphine tea, and got work in the legal marijuana business. Today, James has been sober for more than a year. We asked him what his hopes are for his future. Here's what he said.
I used to think I didn't have a future, none whatsoever. I've blown through a stupid amount of cash, more than most people will ever see in their lives. I've burned and ripped off and robbed and have had worse happen to me, figure it as karma. The principle applies regardless of how you get your money. There is no thugster paradise. You will lose more times than you win. If you're lucky enough to not find yourself dead, behind bars, or on the run, you can stop. It's hard to stop, it really is. There's more to all this shit than just the money. It becomes a lifestyle, an addiction, a curse. But in Nevada, while I was learning to deal blackjack, I found that while sometimes life sucks so much you'd rather be in jail, while other times you meet the woman who was able to love you for all of you and open your eyes to the future, into having a future. I'm going to get married, reconnect with my son, cultivate my own brand of cannabis, and publish a book. I've learned so much from the outlaws and hippies, thugsters, and cops from my 11 years in doing what I did, and it would be a damn shame to let it all go and not share.
Allegedly is a production of Voyage Media. The series is produced by Nat Mundell, Robert Midas, and Dan Benamor, in association with Darren Marlar's Weird Darkness. This episode, Don't Look in the Truck, was directed and produced by Dan Benamor, written by James LaRoche, edited by Thomas Culleton. Original music by Derlis Gonzalez, starring Ben Van Diepen as James. Additional cast credits in the show notes. Keep an eye out on the show notes for updates on James's writing. He's planning a book of essays, and we will update the show notes with information about that when available. If you're enjoying the show, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you're listening, and subscribe now for future episodes.